Good afternoon from the kitchen, folks. Today I'm going to be making a quadruple apple cider. So why is it a quadruple apple cider? Well, I'm using apple juice from concentrate. That's one lot of apples. I'm using a bag of Golden Delicious. That's 2 lot of apples. I'm using 3 jars of homemade apple sauce. These are 50% apple and 50% sugar in content, nothing else. And then I'm using MyProtein's Flavdrops apple flavour. So I've got 4 different apple sauces, excuse the pun. I'm also going to add pectolase because this is probably going to be a hazy cider and try and break that down. And then I'm going to split my ciders across 2 different fermentation vessels. One of them I'm going to ferment with Lalvin EC1118 champagne, sparkling wine and cider yeast. The other I'm going to ferment with Cross Myloof cider yeast. I want to compare final ABV, taste, clarity and the amount of trub that I get in each demijohn. I'm using spring water, but I'm going to begin by making a good cup of tea. And when I say a good cup of tea, I actually mean a big pan of tea. So I've got 4 tea bags and I'm going to add into this at this stage 4 litres of spring water. I'm just going to save a little bit in the bottom of this bottle and the reason why will become apparent. So then heat on. And I just want this to come to a simmer. So I'm going to add my lid. So the purpose of the tea is to create some tannin flavours which should give the cider a bit more body. Okay, now I've got my big chopper out, I'm going to deal with these apples. So as far as the apples go, it's very straightforward. I'm just halving them. I'm leaving the cores in, I'm not worrying about that. Stalks can go if they come out, but they can stay in also, it doesn't matter. And I'm just chucking my apples into this saucepan. My apples are chopped up into this saucepan and I'm now going to add the rest of this water. And that's just a very small amount of water in the bottom which will allow me to steam these apples. So the apples also go on a very low heat and these will break down in about 20 to 30 minutes time, so I'm just going to leave it. Right, I'm just going to give my tea a bit of a mash. It's beginning to reach almost a simmer. I want to get as much flavour and tannin out of these bags as possible. Right, my tea's boiling. I can say that's done, so I'll turn the heat off. Okay, I'm now going to take my apple sauce and add it into my tea. Splash where it will melt. I've now got all the apple sauce in there, so I'm going to put the gas back on. So I want it all to dissolve. I don't want any clumps and lumps. So my apples are now simmering. Just take that lid off. Oh yeah, they're nice and soft now. So there's a lot of liquid come out of them and they'll just break down. So I'm just going to mash them in the pan, cores and all, pips and everything, it doesn't matter. And you'll see why in a minute. I'm just going to let that simmer for another couple of minutes. So I've got a sieve over the big pan and I'm just going to pour the apple pulp into the sieve. There's about a quarter of it gone in there. And then with my wooden spoon I'm just going to work it through the sieve. And if I lift the sieve up you'll see as I work it that apple puree, which is just the broken down apple, nothing else, goes through, and hopefully all the pips and the hard bits will stay in the sieve. And this is 0 waste because everything that's in the sieve I'll be using as garden fertiliser. Now the reason that I'm going to put pectolase in this is that when you cook fruit like this, it quite often leaves a haze. So I'm hoping that the pectolase might break that down, but you never know. If I look underneath, all that apple sauce or pureed apple comes off and into my tea. And that's all that's left in the sieve. That's now all my apples in the pan. And I'm just letting this all mix and steep together. Now I'm going for a high ABV cider, so I'm going to add 600 grams of brewing sugar, which is 3 of these jugs. And I want to stir all this in now until it's completely dissolved. Now, the higher the ABV cider, through putting extra sugars in, the less of an apple flavour you'll get, which is why I've packed this with apples. And that is because the alcohol eats away the flavour. However, because I'm using the MyProtein Flavdrops, that will hopefully back flavour enough for the apple taste to come through and it still be a good strong brew. So, another reason I'm calling it a quadruple cider. Like a Belgian quad of ciders. Except it's a Yorkshire quad. Okay, lid on. Heat off. And I'm now just going to leave this to cool down a little bit before going any further. Okay, I've waited a few hours. The apple mixture in the pan has now cooled down quite a lot. It's still warm, but it's not by any means hot. I've got my 2 fermentation vessels sterilised and ready. So now I'm going to start to add the apple juice. So using the turbo cider method of apple juice from concentrate, it's as straightforward as just putting it in. So in each of these fermentation vessels I'm going to add 1.5 of these containers, so that's 1.5 litres of pure apple juice each. So the story so far is like this. So I've got my big pot of apple solution here. I'm just giving this a stir around. It feels really buoyant, and that's due to the high sugar content. I'm going to begin to transfer it using a jug just because it's such a big pot it'll slop everywhere, because these are light plastic fermentation vessels and they'll just knock over. So I shall start with a jug. And I'm trying to get these as identical as possible. There's going to be some difference, minute hopefully, but I'm trying to get them both to have the same original gravity. Start to pour from the pan now. So if I just look at these, they look very similar. So I'm quite hopeful that this is going to be a fair comparison now. Okay, I want to take the original gravity at 20 degrees Celsius. However, this is still too warm. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to pour out 100 ml from each demijohn and let it cool down separately, because it'll take longer to cool down in the fermentation vessel. So that's my first 100 ml. And this is my second one. Now this isn't going back inside the fermentation vessels, so once I've taken the gravity, that can go. I'll probably drink it. So now into each demijohn I want to add my MyProtein Apple Flavdrops. I'm going to put 3 full pipettes into each demijohn. It's such a tiny amount, it won't affect the gravity. And as I mentioned earlier, the purpose of the Flavdrops is to give it more of an apple flavour, because the high ABV ciders are usually stripped back in terms of flavour, whereas this will maintain that appleness. And I can actually really smell it, and it smells great. Now all that remains is for me to add my yeast. So I'm going to use the Lalvin yeast in this one and the Cross My Loof yeast in this one. So I shall add the Lalvin yeast first. I've got a generous heaped teaspoon. I'll put that straight in, and then I'm going to add about 1/3 of a teaspoon on top of that. I'm then just going to shake this around a little bit so the yeast doesn't just float on top, it actually sinks in. And believe it or not, this yeast is going to get very happy very quickly. We'll see a krausen forming probably within half an hour. It's really fast fermenting, the Lalvin yeast. So the krausen is the foamy head which forms on top. I'm hoping I've left enough space for that. If I haven't left enough space, it's going to come through the airlock, in which case I'll need to use a blow-off pipe. So I'm going to put this airlock in place now. So now it's the turn for the cross-my-loop yeast in the other fermentation vessel, and I'm going to add the same amount as I did before in this vessel. And again, I'm just going to give it a little shake around so it aerates it and so it mixes in. The one thing which I've forgotten to add into both of the vessels is the pectolase, which will help it to be a clearer cider. So I'm just going to put a teaspoonful, or a rounded teaspoonful, into each one. And again, as with the yeast, I'm just going to give it a little shake around so it mixes and doesn't clump together. And again, the same with this one, just giving it a shake around. I shall just get my lids in place. And these are plastic fermentation vessels, and one thing to be aware of, when you move these, when you pick them up, the plastic draws inwards and they act like lungs, and it can suck the water from the airlock into the fermentation vessel. That could taint your brew. So when I do pick these up to move them, I will loosen the lid first so it's not airtight, and then I'll rescrew it tightly once I've got them in place. So let's see which one activates and starts to bubble first. Okay, the cider must is ready for me to take the gravity. So the original gravity in the cross-my-loop demijohn, 1.080, 1080. And I'm now going to follow that up with the apple cider must that's got the Lalvin yeast in. And again, nice and buoyant. And that is also 1.080, 1080. So anyway, this is now an update after exactly an hour. And what we can see, the Lalvin one is definitely more developed than the cross-my-loop one. They've both started to ferment. The Lalvin one has done so more quickly. And, you know, you can see that there's definitely more of what you might call a krausen building on top compared to the cross-my-loop one. So they're both going, that's the good news, and the Lalvin one is slightly more advanced. So I just thought I'd share this update with you. This is now after 3 hours. Just look at the difference in the two fermentation vessels. The Lalvin one on the left is a lot clearer throughout. There's a concentration of trub at the top for the krausen and at the bottom where the sediment lies. But in the cross-my-loop one, it's a lot more spread. So the layer between krausen at the top is less distinct than what it is with the Lalvin one. So it's interesting to see this and how the different yeasts work. 4 days in, looking at the difference now. Look at the amount of sediment and trub on the right-hand side from cross-my-loop compared to on the left from Lalvin. So 5 days in, look at the difference in colours. Lalvin, quite dark, starting to clear a little bit. Cross-my-loop, still heavily sedimented. There's lots of action in this one. I keep seeing eruptions of stuff going upwards. But look at the trub. In the Lalvin, it's all at the top, a little bit at the bottom. In the cross-my-loop, it's only a little bit at the top, and it's all in the bottom. Look, here we go, an eruption. There you go, look at that. So that's really interesting how the yeasts are behaving differently with essentially the same must. Hey from the kitchen folks, today I'm going to be racking and restarting my quadruple apple ciders. Let's have a look at them. So here they both are, the Lalvin yeast one on the left and the Cross Myloof yeast one on the right. Now if you look at that you can see there is a very subtle difference in the colours. This one is ever so slightly darker, slightly more red tinged. That one is more yellow tinged. They've not been cleared at all, they've cleared naturally, and I think that's down to the pectolase. This one stopped fermenting first, the Cross Myloof stopped fermenting first. The Lalvin one probably fermented for another week or so longer. So I'm going to transfer each of these ciders in turn into this demijohn, which has got a filter in it, note. I'm going to get rid of the majority of the trub, although I want some sediment to come through because there'll be some yeast in that, but I want to get rid of the big bits, hence the filter. So I'm not going to be siphoning today because of the amount of trub and stuff. I don't want to lose everything that's down here, so it's just easier to pour it. And I know it will clear naturally anyway afterwards. So I'm just going to very gently pour. I'm now getting down to all the lumps of apple and the trub. I'm just going to let it go through into the filter. And there's a little bit of a waiting game to be played here. Okay, this is what I've got so far. Here's the original fermentation vessel, and here's the mush still dripping into the hydrometer flask. I need to get 100 ml to be able to take the interim gravity. I don't think I'll get it all from the mush, but it's just giving me a bit of a start. So now I'm going to pour this back into the original fermenting vessel. I haven't added the extra apple juice yet. I thought I'd do that afterwards. Okay, so that's in there, and well, I'm up to 20 ml. I've had enough of waiting, so I'm just going to tip this in. A small sacrifice. Right, I'm not pouring that back into the cider in case there's any contaminant. So this is the interim gravity before I add the apple juice, or you could think of it as the first of the final gravities, because there'll be two final gravities. And that's sank perfectly. And this interim gravity is 0.994. 0.994, so I need to now make a note of that. Now I'm going to add a whole litre of apple juice if I can fit it in, and then I need to take another gravity, which will be the next starting gravity for the second fermentation. And that's fitted in perfectly, and the extra sugar from that will give the yeast which is in suspension something to feed on, so there will be a little bit more fermenting takes place. Now it's possible that I won't see the airlock move, and this does happen sometimes when you do this, but it'll still be, the yeast will still be eating the sugar and alcohol will still be being produced. So I now need to take another gravity reading. So my next starting gravity, it's exactly 1.000. So that's the next starting gravity. I'm now going to leave this in the demijohn for 2 more weeks, and I'll take another final gravity. I have to work out both alcohol percentages from the original gravity to the interim gravity, and then the second original gravity to the final gravity. I add them both together. That tells me what the final alcohol by volume will be. Don't be confused by the maths. I'm going to demonstrate it to you further on into the film. Okay, everything I've just done for the Lalvin cider, I'm now going to do exactly the same for the Cross Myloof one. So I'm just going to do this as a brief edited highlights rather than in detail like last time, because it's just the same procedure. So the procedure is exactly the same as it was for the cider made with the Lalvin yeast. I'm just pouring the cider now made with the Cross Myloof yeast back into the original fermentation vessel. Put some of that cider into the hydrometer jar, and now I'm going to take the gravity. So the cross my loof interim gravity is also 0.994, so they've performed exactly the same. So I need to add apple juice to this now and top it up like I did with the Lalvin one. So I need to take another restarting gravity. Now I've added a litre of apple juice. It probably will be exactly the same. And the restarting gravity for this one is also 1.000, exactly the same. So here they both are, labelled with apple juice added, and I'm now going to leave them for 2 more weeks. I'm not adding any finings to these to clear them. I'm going to let them clear naturally because I think they will clear well. So I'll be back in a couple of weeks' time when it comes to bottling. Good afternoon from the kitchen, folks. It's my quadruple apple cider bottling day. Yep, bottling day, not clearing day, because it's already cleared. And on the left you can see my apple Lalvin cider, and on the right the Cross My Loof cider. So these are the yeasts I've used, Lalvin in this one, Cross My Loof in this one. Look at the difference in the colours. This one's quite orangey with the Lalvin EC1118. This one's more yellowy with the Cross My Loof. This one is absolutely crystal clear. The Cross My Loof is pretty much crystal clear, but it's definitely got a very, very slight cloudiness in comparison. So there's probably a little bit more suspended bits and bobs in that than there is in this one. But they're both perfectly clear enough for bottling, and that's what's going to happen next. So in the sink at the minute, I've got some 750ml bottles and then a double-sized 1.5 litre Magnum. In each of the 750ml bottles goes a nice, generous heaped teaspoonful of standard household sugar. I'm not using brew sugar for this part. And that will go in each one of those, and then in the Magnum, I'll put double the amount. So starting with my Lalvin, it's bung off. Siphoning tube in. I've got the tube held in place with this clip. The bottom of the tube is just above the sediment line. It might draw a bit of sediment up, but the first bit that comes out is going into the hydrometer flask. Let's do it. And we're on. Right. Well, it's flying out. It smells really appley. Very good sign for cider. I'm hoping to get 6 750ml bottles out of each of these. I don't know whether I will or not. God, it really does smell appley. I'm really got high hopes for this one. Okay, it's getting near the bottom. And there we go, bubbles in the siphoning tube. Indicate that that's over. If I unclip the top, I can probably pour a little bit more out into the bottle. Now I reckon if I add what's in the hydrometer jar to that, that will fill that bottle up. So before I can do that, I need to take the final gravity. So in goes the hydrometer. Sinks nicely. And I'm finishing on a final gravity of 0.995. 0.995. So I'm just going to pour this into there now, just to see if it does indeed top the bottle up. And it looks like it will do. I don't normally do this because of cross-contamination risks, but it's just one bottle. And that is perfect. So I've got 6 750ml bottle equivalents from the Lalvin yeast apple cider. Right, I've got my bottles on the sink. I now need to get these bunged before I move on to the Cross My Loof cider. So I've got my bungs softening in hot water, very hot water. That makes them a lot more malleable and easier to push into the bottles than what they would otherwise be. And the other help that I've got is my glove, which I've only just started to use, but it doesn't half protect my hand. there we go. 1 in, no pain. Like it. 2, 3, 4. Oh, it's going, but it's a struggle. Oh, that would have been painful. Right, no hand injury, all bungs in. Great stuff. Now, the bungs are in, but they need to be kept in. And to that end, I need to use cages to secure them. And as the sugar which I've put into these bottles reacts with the yeast, or as the yeast begins to eat the sugar, it'll make a tiny, tiny bit more alcohol. And that will create CO2 and pressure. And without these, bang, you've got some popping. So that looks all right to me. That's held in place. I've got to do this for the rest of them. It's not that exciting to watch. Back in a minute. So these ones are now done. I'm just going to rinse the bottles off to get the sticky residue off them. And then I'm going to put them to one side to dry. Once I've done that, I'm going to do the other bottles exactly the same way. So what I've just done with the Lalvin, I'm going to do with the Cross My Loaf. I don't need to film it all twice. So let's come back in 5 minutes when I've got all my bottles filled. Catch you then. So I've got my Cross My Loaf bottled in just the same way. I'm now going to take the gravity of the Cross My Loaf cider, the final gravity. I would say that that's finished on a final gravity of 0.994. Very, very, very slightly ahead of the Lalvin one. And there's my Cross My Loaf cider now bottled as well. So I've got Lalvin up there, Cross My Loaf down here. It's time to work out the ABVs and make out some labels. Hey folks, we've got a bit of maths now. So I've put this into PowerPoint because I think it's easier to explain it. So hopefully you can follow this with me. So this is the cider which has got the Lalvin EC1118 yeast in it. So the original gravity was 1.080 and the interim gravity after the first fermentation was 0.994. So it's the standard formula for working out the ABV. Original gravity minus interim gravity times 131.25 equals 11.28% ABV. So that's straightforward. However, I then racked this off and I took a litre out of it basically and added another litre of apple juice. So in doing so, I've diluted the alcohol because I've added something which didn't have any alcohol into it, which was the apple juice, to this 11.28. So I had 4 litres left in the fermentation vessel, which was then diluted by an additional 1 litre of apple juice. So therefore, I need to reduce the ABV accordingly. So I simply go 11.28 divided by 5 times 4 means that after I'd added the extra apple juice, I've got 9.02% ABV. I hope you're following me on this. Then I let it ferment. So the restarting gravity after I'd added the additional apple juice was 1.000, and the final gravity at the end of the fermentation was 0.995. So the secondary fermentation alcohol by volume, so the second fermentation that took place was 1.000 minus 0.995 equals 0.005. Multiply that by 131.25. So me adding that extra litre of apple juice increased the ABV by 0.65%, which is not much at all. I then take that figure and I add it to the diluted ABV from the previous slide down there, the 9.02%. So 9.02 plus 0.65 gives me a final ABV of 9.67%. I'm just going to say 9.7% because I've put that extra bit of sugar in now for a tertiary fermentation in the bottle to create a sparkle, and it will up it very, very, very slightly. So I'm just going to call the Lalvin EC1118 yeast cider a 9.7% ABV cider. Hope that was straightforward enough. Now, it's exactly the same formula for the Cross My Loaf one. Original gravity was the same, 1.080. Interim gravity was 0.994. Interim ABV, again, 11.28%, just the same. I had the extra litre of apple juice, so it dilutes it. So I go 11.28 divided by 5 times 4 equals 9.02%, so just the same. And then the only very slight difference was that the final gravity of the Cross My Loaf was 0.994 rather than 0.995. So exactly the same calculations, but with slightly different numbers. And this gives me a final figure of 9.8% for the Cross My Loaf yeast cider. I hope that makes sense. Maths is not my strong point, but I think I've explained that hopefully well enough for you. I'm just going to label my bottles now. So for the Lalvin cider, I've put an L after the name of it, and for the Cross My Loof, a C, just so I know when I open it and I can compare the tastes. It's just a simple template in Microsoft Word. I like it to look nice. Okay, I'm just going to label my bottles. I like to take a little bit of pride in them. So I'm starting off with the Lalvin ones. So now I'm moving on to my Cross My Loof yeast cider. And there they all are. So welcome to my brew room. So this is just a room where I allow my bottles to condition, and I've got some temperature controlled shelves here, although I don't need to worry about the temperature because it's summer and it very rarely drops below 20. But if it does drop below 19.5, then there's a thermostat over there which kicks into a heater behind and warms things back up to over 20. I don't think it's going to really happen for the next few weeks, at least anyway. So what I've got just here on the left is the Lalvin apple cider, and on the right the Cross My Loof apple cider. It's going to sit here for a month and condition. The conditioning process will be the time that the yeast eats the sugar, which creates the sparkle inside there by building up the pressure. At the same time, the flavour will mature and also clarity will happen as any particles in there drop to the bottom of the bottle. So I'll be opening these and tasting in a month's time. So I'll catch you at some point in September. See you then. Good evening from the kitchen, folks. It's my Quadruple Apple Cider opening night. Cross My Loof versus Lalvin, the battle continues. Okay, so I'm going to begin by opening the Cross My Loof one. So I'm looking at the bung, and if you can see on that, it's raised about a millimetre. So I think, hopefully, fingers crossed, there will be a little bit of life in this. I'm hoping for a fizz. I'm hoping for it to look nice in the glass and be fairly clear. I want a nice smell, but above all, I want a good flavour. What am I going to get? Let's find out. So, Cross My Loof, don't let me down. Oh, the bung has definitely raised. Okay, am I going to get a pop? It reminds me of my first time. Right. I'm on about when I brewed as a teenage boy. What did you think I was talking about? Come on. Can we just all appreciate that? Because that's made me very happy. Right. Oh, my last one, my lemon one, was a bit... this one, very happy with. Smells really appley. It looks lovely. Let's have a taste. Wow. That is the most appley flavoured one I've done yet. That is really, really nice. Oh yes, definitely. What's the percentage on this one again? 9.8%. And what's scary about this is it tastes about like 6 or 7% in terms of the flavour, the sweetness, like a cider that you would get in a bar basically. This is dangerous, and it's a really nice hot sunny September day. A dangerous day for a cider, but I tell you what, I'm going to enjoy this. So this is the Cross My Loof yeast one. I'm going to open the Lalvin one when we've got through this one. So wish me luck. I'll catch you shortly. Hey folks, I'm back with the second of the quad apple ciders, opening this time with the Lalvin yeast. So the one I've just opened, the Cross My Loof, was a really, really flavoursome, medium sweet, strong cider. This is also strong at 9.7, and like the Cross My Loof one, the bung has raised by about 0.5 ml. So hopefully that means that this one will have some life in it as well. So again, I'm looking for having some life, looking good, tasting good, smelling good, all that sort of stuff. Let's see what happens. Am I going to get a pop? I'm going to get a very sore hand. Blue roll required. What would the hospitality industry do without blue roll? I think it'd grind to a halt. Right, here we go. Am I going to get a pop? Oh, another pop! This time I didn't get the spurt out though. Managed to control myself now. Right, what we're going to look like? Happy. Happy days. That looks lovely, doesn't it? Right, let's just do half a glass. Let's appreciate the sound. The look. So again, really nice and carbed. Good colour, good clarity. Great smell again. Interesting. I would have put the Cross My Loof one at medium sweet. I'd put this one at medium. It's ever so slightly drier. Now it's interesting because they're both the same percentage, yet the Lalvin EC1118 yeast has definitely delivered a cider with a slightly drier edge. And that is my preferred yeast usually, but having had both of these, I actually preferred the flavour of the Cross My Loof cider yeast. So that's really making me consider now what yeast I'm going to use for future cider brews. Do I stick to the Lalvin yeast for wine and go with the Cross My Loof cider yeast for ciders, or do I try a Lalvin D47, which is probably my next logical step on the cider path? Anyway, I'm not disappointed because it's very flavoursome and it's a medium, and so it's very drinkable. Too drinkable, to be quite honest. Right, anyway, pleasure doing business with you folks. Catch you on the next brew, whenever that may be. It won't be long. Cheers. The film that you've just watched is a Moss Home and Garden production. You can find more by going to www.mosshomeandgarden.co.uk. I'd just like to say thank you very much for supporting my YouTube channel and for watching my films. It really is very much appreciated. If you haven't already done so, please subscribe to my YouTube channel in order to receive future updates about the home and garden films which I upload. You can find my YouTube channel by going to www.mosshomeandgarden.co.uk. Please click on the red subscribe button. When you've done that, a little bell will appear. If you press that also, then you'll get future updates about the films which I upload. If you like my films, if you like my style of filming, then you might also like my travel channel, which you will find by going to youtube.com/Stuart Moss or type in www.mosstravel.tv. Again, if you could subscribe to that channel, it would be hugely appreciated. If you'd like to get Moss Home and Garden updates on Facebook, then please open Facebook and do a search for Moss Home and Garden, and you will find the page. If you like the page, then you will get future updates on there. And if you'd like to connect on Instagram for home, garden and travel photography, as well as some stories, then my username is StuMoss, STUMOSS. If you'd like to connect on Twitter, then my username is @StuartMoss. And if you'd like to contact me about film usage or any other issue, please just email me on stewmosshomegarden@gmail.com. Once again, thank you very much for supporting my channel, for watching my films. I do appreciate it. I'd just like you all to have a great day.